Partiest of the people, hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the 6th season of Law and Candor. 6th season, still blows my mind. The podcast wholly devoted to pursuing the legal technology revolution. I am Bill. I am here with Rob as always. Thank you for tuning in. Before we get to our guest today, in the interview portion of the program that covers the convergence of AI and data privacy and eDiscovery, we are going to focus on the area of our program that we call
Sightings of Radical Brilliance.
Rob, what do we have on tap today?
Well, and I think it's pretty timely, especially, we just had an election, and what I'm reading is a story that was published in Bloomberg called Most U.S. Voters See Misinformation Online and Many Believe It, which is, to me, just kind of fascinating because I don't believe stuff that I see online necessarily, but according to the data in this, a lot of people are being exposed to just misleading and outright incorrect information, and a high percentage of people apparently believe it. And this is just creating a huge challenge.
I got to tell you, this is something that should be apolitical. I don't think that this should be one side or the other. I think everyone who votes should want real information. Right? For whatever side you're on, you should want real information. And what I always tell people whenever I hear something that sounds outlandish on the right or left is, did you get a second source on that, or what was your source? Right? Because there is a such thing as confirmation bias, and some people will not check their source if it just confirms their previous bias. So if they hear that this person did something bad, or that person did something bad, or that this process, like voting by mail, I think was the example given in this article, voting by mail, 85% of people read somewhere that voting by mail leads to voter fraud, and 35% of those people agreed with that. So it's having an impact, right? And so what I always tell anybody that comes to me with something like that is, okay, so if that's the case, like, where did you read that? What's your source? And did you get a backup for that source? I mean,
yeah,
we have to be diligent as citizens at this point, because if you just read something that makes sense to you or confirms your previous bias and you go with it, I mean, you can make a lot of bad decisions based on who you vote for. And again, I don't care which party line you're on.
And it's true, like, we tend to think of it at the personal level, but I mean, imagine if you're a Facebook or a Twitter where you're having this stuff posted, on your platforms, what is your responsibility to go out and correct it to make sure that, it's not influencing something as important as a presidential election?
That is such a fine line, though, too, right? Because you don't want people to be censored. It's better to be an educated consumer of information than I think it is to regulate speech. But it's such a fine line because it is a really important thing. My favorite meme on the internet is a picture of Abraham Lincoln with a quote that says, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet," end of quote, Abraham Lincoln. And it's just, I mean, if that doesn't capture it 100%, there are people that read that and don't get that joke. Anyway, I think this is timely. Again, completely apolitical. Double, triple check, and I think this is what the article gets into. Double and triple check your sources. Don't just go with something that makes intuitive sense to you because of what you previously believed and what you brought to that conversation or piece of information. It strikes me as very irresponsible to not understand whether or not the information that's getting to you is correct, or if it just confirms your bias. So whatever, do with it what you will. Be an educated voter, whichever way you go. I think there are arguments to be made for both sides. It's just, let's make those arguments based on real facts.
I agree.
Cool. All right. We are going to get into our interview portion of the program here. And we love this topic. We love this person. Really think you're going to enjoy this. It was a great conversation. Enjoy.
All right, and welcome to the main event. We're excited to have one of our good friends, John Del Piero from Lighthouse, to talk about the convergence of AI and data privacy in eDiscovery. And even more specifically, how AI is being used to identify things like PII and other types of personal information. And John, I don't mean to throw this a little bit out of left field at you, but I know you'll go with it. Instead of just introducing yourself and giving your title, we're trying to dig a little bit deeper into our guests, and would appreciate if you could just give us a little bit of your history and how did you come to get into eDiscovery and end up in your current role? We know that everyone has a great story around this, and we'd love to hear yours.
I just magically appeared one day and was like an eDiscovery oracle.
That's so weird. Yeah, me too.
It's just pure magic that happened, and the industry was blessed. No, as most folks know, and most folks in the industry, it was a roundabout way of entering the industry. I came out of college as an engineer, joined a small startup in San Francisco doing like process development, and that actually ultimately became Lighthouse. So sitting here a little over 10 years later, and still doing kind of somewhat similar things. I'm leaving the engineering to the smarter, more brilliant folks, and I'm doing the oversight over a variety of multinational corporations in the healthcare industry.
So, John, let's jump right into it. I don't think this is a new issue, but it certainly is getting more attention because of breaches, because of technology, because of different regulations that are popping up. What are you hearing from our clients when it comes to challenges around identifying PHI and PII?
I think it's just been a manual process for a long time. It's search terms, regex, having physical reviewers click through documents and try to identify and document PII. And that has been, frankly, not a massive issue in the industry prior to GDPR. And then as these new privacy rules got put in place, that burden started to grow, as well as other things like cyber breaches where PII becomes a much bigger aspect of the matter. And I think a lot of corporations are looking for what's next. They're just not willing to spend the dollars that they used to pull out names, social security numbers, addresses, and frankly, like based on where the investigation or litigation is coming, it's getting more and more complex.
And I guess not just that, but like when you talk about PII, for example, it doesn't mean the same thing everywhere. And and if that wasn't bad enough, there's new laws and restrictions that are popping up about it. Every day it almost seems like. How do you kind of keep flexible in the face of a constantly changing target?
I think that's exactly it, Rob. It's a problem not only because it's manually intensive, but it's also a dynamic issue because GDPR is different from the California privacy statutes, which is different from the various other kind of state by state privacy statutes. And then, frankly, it's completely different from what you need to identify in situations where personal information was breached and you have to report that back to the insurance company, the opposing side, the individuals themselves. So it's a really dynamic issue that's not as clear cut as it used to be, I feel like, where it was just, hey, social security numbers and credit card numbers. That's what we're looking for. That's really the only risk that we have. Now it's names, it's addresses, it's medical records, and anything that can really match the two individuals together. And it requires, because of that complexity, I think it requires a really advanced perspective and way of looking at the data and being able to both evaluate what's there and pulling that information out.
Yeah, so let's talk about the evolution of the technology for this issue. So can you speak to how AI and analytics help to automate the identification of PII and PHI, and what are the key benefits of using that kind of technology?
I think that's really where the kind of revolution of PII, PHI, and just personal information in general is going, because of those complexities and frankly oddities in how data is structured, because an address looks completely different from a social security number, it looks completely different from a date of birth. That's really where you need advanced analytics. And frankly, a lot of the initial tools that hit the market, the basic kind of predictive coding tools, don't really meet that need. And I think that's where the industry is going. Artificial intelligence and analytics is always this hot button issue in the eDiscovery world. And this is really where it starts, the rubber meets the road, where there's a very clear need and a very clear reason why the artificial intelligence is kind of here to stay, and where where value is going to be driven in our industry.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, especially when you're comparing it to the current process, which is really just using people, looking at documents and hoping that they're being consistent and hoping that they're catching stuff. It just seems like it's really ripe for a better technology enhanced approach to this. One thing that we really try to do on the podcast is to give people practical tips on, how they can deal with this issue. And we just wondered if you had some that you'd be willing to share.
Especially when we have an oracle as a guest. When we
There
have
you
an
go.
oracle in any, you need to leave us with bits of information, with real acts of genius, please.
Yeah, you're only the 5th oracle we've had on the podcast, so.
So I would contend that my first practical tip is consult your oracle. Like that's the way to go. No, but really, like in eDiscovery in general, government investigations, the legal industry as a whole, you really want to find that advisor that kind of is stress testing the market tools, is constantly looking for the latest and greatest, and looking for holes in the latest and greatest, and kind of where they can tell you what works and where it doesn't work and how to work around that. I think the other big piece, especially in this world, is the combination of there's a lot of different stakeholders here. The CISO, the cyber breach group, the legal operations group, the eDiscovery group, the data forensics group. There's tons of different individuals, different technologies, all in play in different areas. And I think it's really valuable to try to coordinate and work with those resources. And then just for yourself, be aware of technology. Look at as similar to my first point of just consult your oracle, just be looking and asking questions from various different folks, even if they're not as wondrous as someone who might be interviewed on this show.
All right. Now, see, it's not my job now, and I'm just a simple country lawyer, but it's my job to try to capture the genius of what you just said here. And if we're going to start to summarize some of your points here, and I think we all agree, it's been a manual process for a long time, and that was okay. That was satisfactory for a long time until GDPR and like-minded regulations came around, and then especially cyber breaches. And the combination of those acted as the necessity, i.e. the mother of the invention of the technologies that are now popping up in this area. So, the other thing you mentioned, and I think this was a great point, that all these statutes all present a different and dynamic obligation or burden on behalf of the corporation. And the technologies that existed, the manual processes, the basic predictive coding, just didn't meet the need anymore. And so that's when we started to see AI and automation really take the lead in this area around identifying PII and PHI. And your practical tips, consult your oracle. All kidding aside, yeah, there are people within your organizations that are always evaluating the latest and greatest. Make sure you stay in touch with them. Also, there's a lot of different people that are affected by this, whether it's the CISO or the eDiscovery professional or the cyber attorney within your organization or a privacy attorney. Make sure that you're staying in touch with all of them, and then just do your own due diligence and stay on top of the technology that's out there yourself, and stay up to date on those, and then consult with the different people within your organization and how it might affect them. I think those are all great tips. I mean, I'm not shocked at all wearing the crown of the oracle. We expected wisdom to flow from high upon the mountain. But all seriousness, this is a real issue, and the more technology comes to meet this issue, I think the greater the burden is going to be on corporations, because regulators are going to say, hey, you can actually deal with this now. The technology is there to help you deal with it, so we're going to hold you responsible. So if you're not staying up to date on the latest and greatest technology, you're putting your company in a very difficult position, a precarious position, and we're starting to see that more and more. These different laws, they're trying to outdo each other in terms of how they protect consumers, how they protect their PII. And so I think it's incumbent upon the people responsible in the organizations to know what technology is out there to keep them in compliance on this issue.
Yeah,
so wise.
So wise. What a summary. What a summary.
Well, listen, I am an oracle of regurgitation.
There you go.
I do not have original thoughts, but regurgitation, man, I can do it with the best of them.
You're the best parrot money can buy.
See, right? Not bad. I'll take it. John, thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it. This is a good one. I think this will be a well-received podcast because it's an issue that keeps coming up over and over.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And thanks for the time.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying Long Candor. Please rate us, give us a comment. Help us keep Law and Candor in the #1 position for...
So certainly the #1 podcast in my mom's house.
Yeah, for sure. And it will stay that way as long as you continue to rate us. Thank you.